The wind screamed through the trees, pushing thick snow across the lonely cabin in the mountains. It was the kind of cold that made your bones ache. That made animals hide and people stay inside with fires burning. Eli was alone, as always, chopping wood outside his cabin when he heard something strange, soft, almost lost in the wind. A crino, maybe a voice, or just the wind playing tricks. He stopped, holding his axe still, and listened. There it was again, a weak, high-pitched sound, like someone trying to call out but too tired to scream. His eyes narrowed, and he dropped the axe into the snow, grabbing his coat and stepping down the porch. "Hello!" He shouted into the storm, but only snow answered him. He moved forward, boots crunching in the ice. The wind hit his face like knives. He walked toward the trees where the sound seemed to come from. And then he saw them, two figures, curled in the snow, barely moving. They were thin, too thin and nearly naked. Their skin wasn't normal, not like human skin. It shimmered with a soft lavender glow, and tiny crystals of ice clung to their bodies like they were already becoming part of the snow. Eli's breath caught in his throat. They weren't human, that much was clear. But they were alive barely. One of them lifted her head slowly. Her eyes glowed faintly, bright silver with fear and pain. Her lips trembled, trying to speak, but nothing came out. She leaned protectively over the other girl, shielding her from the wind, even though she could barely sit up herself. Eli took off his coat without thinking. He wrapped it around both of them, kneeling in the snow. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. I've got you." They didn't understand his words, but they felt the warmth in his voice, the kindness in his eyes. The girl who had lifted her head finally collapsed again, still holding the other in her arms. He carried them back, one in each arm. Their bodies were cold as ice, but he moved fast, kicking the door open with his boot. Inside, the cabin was small but warm. The fire burned in the stone hearth, and a pot of stew boiled quietly on the stove. He laid them gently on the rug near the fire and wrapped them in blankets. Their skin was marked not just by cold, but by strange patterns, like burns or tattoos. But these weren't for beauty. They looked like numbers, like brands. He didn't ask questions, not yet. He just focused on helping them survive the night. He brought warm soup, but they were too weak to eat. He dabbed their faces with warm water. He stayed up all night, making sure the fire never died. At some point, the older of the two opened her eyes again. She stared at him, confused, scared, but also curious. Her lips moved slowly, as if she wanted to say something, but all she could whisper was, "Why?" Eli knelt beside her. "Because you were freezing to death," he said, even though he knew she couldn't understand. "And because you looked like you needed someone." She blinked, then slowly closed her eyes again, not in fear this time, but in trust. Outside, the storm continued, covering the world in white silence. But inside that cabin, for the first time in who knew how long, the two alien girls had warmth. They had shelter. They had someone who didn't want to hurt them, someone who didn't turn them away. And Elihu had lived alone for years, with no visitors and no hope, sat beside them, watching the fire, wondering what kind of world they had come from, and what kind of trouble might follow them next. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their story, but he knew one thing for sure. They weren't strangers anymore. They were his now, and he wasn't going to let them die. The morning light pushed through the frost-covered windows, soft and golden. Eli had barely slept, but he didn't care. He sat by the fire, sipping bitter coffee, eyes fixed on the two alien girls still wrapped in thick blankets on the floor. The older one stirred first. Her silver eyes opened slowly, blinking at the strange room, at the warmth she was not used to. Her gaze landed on Eli, and she didn't panic. Not this time. The younger one lay beside her, still asleep. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Eli leaned over with a soft smile and said, "Good morning, of." Course, she didn't understand, but she watched him carefully. Like she was trying to figure out what kind of creature he was. Was he safe? Dangerous? Kind? He pointed to himself. "Eli," he said clearly, placing a hand on his chest. "Eli," the girl frowned. Then looked at the younger one and whispered something in her own strange tongue. Then, very slowly, she pointed to herself and said, "Theory." Her voice was broken, dry like paper, but clear. Eli smiled wide. "Theory," he repeated gently. Then he looked at the younger one and her. Theory hesitated. Her silver eyes darkened a little. She pulled back one edge of the blanket and revealed something burned into the younger girl's upper shoulder, 3 black symbols. Burned into the skin like a brand, not a name. Eli stared. Something twisted in his chest. "That's not a name," he muttered. "That's a number." Theory nodded slowly, and tears formed in her eyes. She tapped the brand softly and said, 6. "That's what they called her?" Eli's hand clenched. Who would mark a girl like that? Who would call someone by a number? "No," he said. Firmly, "she's not a number. She deserves a real name." Theory looked confused, but listened. Eli thought for a moment and then smiled. "Lena," he whispered. "How about Lena?" Theory looked down at the sleeping girl, her lips trembling, and after a long pause, she smiled too. "Lena," she repeated softly. It was the first time she smiled since arriving. Later that day, Theory tried to sit up. Eli helped her onto a small couch near the fire. He gave her warm soup and bread. She ate slowly, like she wasn't sure if it was real. Eli sat across from her, keeping his voice calm and low. "I don't know what happened to you," he said. "But you don't have to run anymore." Theory looked at him with wide, honest eyes. And then she reached into her torn clothes, pulling out something small and metal. She handed it to him. It was a tracking chip. Burnt out and broken, Eli frowned. "You destroyed this?" She nodded. "They tracked us. Always, but I broke mine before we escaped." Lena still. Recovering, Eli's mind spun, so they were being hunted. Owned, controlled, but somehow they escaped. Somehow they reached his little cabin, hidden deep in the mountains, and now he had 2 alien fugitives in his care. Theory spoke again, slower. This time, trying hard to use his language. "We were not born free. We were made, trained, hurt. We are not from Earth, but we ran." Eli's throat tightened. She was trying so hard to make him understand. He nodded slowly. "Well, you're safe now. As long as you're with me, you're not a number, you're not a slave, you're someone." Theory's lips parted. Like she wanted to cry, but no tears came. Her body was too used to pain, too empty, that night. Lena woke up briefly. She saw Three's face beside her, and Eli nearby. Stirring soup, she didn't speak, but she reached out just a little with her hand. Theory took it gently. For the first time in her life, Lena wasn't cold. She wasn't just 6. She was someone, and someone had said her name. The snow had stopped falling, but the world outside was still silent, cold, and white. Eli stood near the window, staring out at the frozen forest, something gnawing at his gut, a feeling he couldn't shake inside the cabin. Theory sat beside the fire with Lena in her arms. The younger girl had gained a little color in her face. Her body was still weak, but she had stopped shivering. She clung to Theory like a shadow, always watching Eli with big, uncertain eyes. They were starting to feel safe, but Eli knew better. People like him didn't get surprise visitors in the mountains. He lived miles from the nearest town, and no one ever passed by without a reason. So when he heard the sound of something metallic clicking outside his cabin, he froze. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't nature, it was a machine. He didn't say a word. He walked calmly to the fire, gently knelt beside Theory, and whispered, "Take Lena to the back room, hide there, and don't come out. No matter what happens, Theory." Looked at him with wide eyes, but she nodded. She scooped up Lena and hurried quietly into the back room. Closing the door behind her, Eli moved to the corner. Kay pulled up a floorboard and took out a small rifle wrapped in cloth he hadn't used it in years, but now something told him he might need it. He opened the front door slowly. The cold wind brushed past his face. It wasn't the cold that made his skin crawl. It was the shape standing in the distance. A tall, dark figure wearing full-body armor that shimmered with alien metal, its face hidden behind a reflective black visor, lights blinking softly on its chest. It didn't move, just stood there. Like it was scanning the cabin silently, Eli raised the rifle but didn't aim. "This is private land," he called out. "You're not welcome here." The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised one arm, and a soft red light blinked in two. The air showing strange symbols, alien letters that hovered in front of its visor. Eli couldn't read them, but he understood the message. It was looking for something or someone. He stepped out onto the porch, gun held low but ready. "There's no one here for you," he said sharply. "Turn around and go." The figure tilted its head slightly, then turned away and walked back into the woods, disappearing without a sound. Eli stood there for a full minute, heart pounding in his chest, waiting to see if it would return. But the forest was quiet again. Only then did he lower the gun and go back inside. Locking the door behind him, Theory came out slowly, holding Lena tightly. Her face was pale and her eyes full of fear. "Tracker," she whispered. "That was a tracker, not a soldier. It finds runaways." Eli sat down hard in his chair. "So they're looking for you," he said, not surprised. "They know you're gone." Theory nodded. "They will come again." With more, he looked at her. She wasn't just a girl hiding from her past. She was someone who had escaped something designed to break her. And now, they wanted her back, not for justice, for control. "Then we make a plan," Eli said calmly. "You're not going back to them. Not now, not ever." Lena coughed softly and whispered her sister's name. Theory bent down to comfort her, and Eli watched them both. Something stirring inside him. He had lived alone for so long he forgot what it meant to protect someone. Now he had 2 reasons to remember. He went to the back room, cleared out an old closet, filled it with food, blankets, and a radio jammer from his old gear. He didn't know how advanced their trackers were, but he wasn't taking chances. That night, no one slept much. The fire stayed lit, the gun stayed loaded. And the cabin, once a place of silence, now beat with fear and purpose. Eli had no idea how far these people or creatures would go to get the girls back. But one thing was clear. They weren't safe. Even here, the cabin was quiet, but not peaceful. Fear moved through the walls like cold wind. Theory sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Her hands were wrapped around a mug. But the tea inside had gone cold long ago. Eli watched her from the table. He had questions, many of them, but he didn't ask. Not yet. He didn't want to push her. But she was ready now. She looked up, eyes heavy, voice soft. "You want to know?" Eli nodded slowly. "Only if you're ready." Theory took a deep breath. Her eyes didn't look at him. They looked into the fire, like it was showing her everything she wished she could forget. "We were born on a ship," she said. "Not a home, not a city. Just steel and wires. Thousands of us, all the same, all made for service." She spoke slowly, like every word was a weight. Eli listened, quiet and still. "They raised us in cages," she continued. "Taught us pain before they taught us words, hunger before kindness. We were not supposed to speak, only obey." Eli's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just waited. "They tested us electricity. heat, cold, starvation, she said. They wanted to see which ones could survive the worst. The ones who didn't were burned. Eli blinked. Burned. Theory nodded. Not just dead, erased, no body, no memory. We were numbers, not names. I was 13, Lena was 6. She looked at him then, eyes filled with an emotion too deep to name. When you gave us names. It hurt because we never thought we were allowed to have them. Eli felt a lump in his throat. He had seen war, seen pain. But this was something different. This was cruelty born from science, from design. Did no one ever try to stop them? He asked quietly. Theory laughed, but there was no joy in it. The galaxy is big, human. And no one cares about girls born in labs. We were not citizens, we were products. She stood up, pulled back the blanket around her shoulder, and showed him a series of numbers and lines burned into her skin just like Lena had. But this one went deeper, with blackened edges and strange symbols under it. Some parts were still healing. Eli stared at it, rage building inside him. How did you escape? Theory's voice became sharper now. There was one worker-an old alien woman who had been there too long. She took pity on us one night. She opened the cage and said, "Run. Before they sell you." We ran. We didn't even know what planet we landed on. She looked around the cabin, her voice trembling. We were not trying to survive. We were just trying to disappear. Eli rubbed his face with his hands. You didn't disappear, he said quietly. You ended up on my doorstep, half frozen. I'm sorry, she whispered. We brought danger to you. No, Eli replied firmly. You brought meaning. Theory blinked. Confused? Meaning? He nodded. I've lived out here. For years, with no one, just snow and silence. You too. You gave me something to care about again. In the corner, Lena stirred, waking slowly. She looked up at Thury and reached for her hand. Thury smiled gently and knelt beside her, brushing the hair from Lena's forehead. She still has nightmares, Thury said. They put things in her mind. Bad images, fear triggers. They trained her to obey when she hears certain sounds. Eli frowned. Like a machine. Thury nodded. Yes. But she's fighting it, every day. Eli stood up and walked over to the fireplace. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small music player. I don't know if this helps, he said, but music healed parts of me. Maybe it can help her too. He placed the speaker near Lena and pressed play. A soft melody filled the cabin slow. Warm, almost like a lullaby. Lena didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She smiled, just a little. And in that moment, Eli knew one thing for sure. They were not machines. They were not weapons. They were not property. They were girls. And someone had to make the galaxy remember. That even if it had to start in this tiny wooden cabin in the middle of nowhere. The snow outside began to melt, just a little as the days passed. But inside the cabin, something much deeper had started to thaw hearts. Trust and broken souls. Eli had turned his quiet, lonely home into something more. Each day, he gave Theory and Lena a little piece of normal, and each day, they gave something back without even realizing it. He didn't ask for much, just small steps. He showed them how to hold a spoon without shaking, how to eat slowly without fear of it being taken away, how to sit at the table without expecting pain afterward. Theory was the first to smile again, really smile. Not the sad, polite kind, but the kind that surprised even her. It happened one morning when Eli burned the pancakes and swore under his breath. She laughed before she could stop herself, and her hand flew to her mouth like she had done something wrong, but Eli just laughed with her, and suddenly, the room felt warm in a way fire couldn't explain. Lena was slower. She still flinched at loud sounds and hid behind her sister when the wind howled at night. But she started drawing in the ashes near the fire little stars, circles, animals. She liked birds the most. Though she'd never seen one up close, Eli brought her a book full of birds one day. Colorful and soft-paged, she hugged it like a treasure, eyes wide with wonder, for a girl born in a cage. Even a picture of freedom was a miracle. One evening, as the fire crackled low, Eli brought out an old coat, too small for him now. He handed it to Theory. "For you," he said simply. "It's not much, but it's warm." She touched the coat like it was made of glass, then looked up at him. "Why do you care so much?" Eli looked at the two girls sitting on the rug, Lena tracing a sparrow in the ash, Theory holding the coat with shaking hands. "I guess because I know what it's like to feel cold inside," he answered. "Maybe not the same way, but enough to recognize it." Theory nodded slowly. "We never knew kindness before. We were trained to be useful, not loved." "You don't have to be useful to be loved," Eli replied gently. "You just have to be you." That night, the cabin was quiet again, but the silence felt different. Not empty, peaceful. Theory sat beside Eli, watching the fire. Her voice was soft. "You gave us more than food, more than heat. What did I give?" He asked. "You gave us names," she said. "And you taught us warmth that doesn't come from fire." Outside, something cracked in the forest, a branch. Maybe, or something else. Eli stood quickly and walked to the window. His hand hovered. Near the rifle resting on the wall, Theory stood behind him, silent. A shadow moved between the trees. They both saw it. "They're getting closer." She whispered. "They'll keep searching, I know," Eli said, "but I'm not giving you up." She placed her hand on his arm. "We don't want to run anymore." Eli turned to face her. "Then we stay. We fight, if we have to. This is your home now, too." Theory blinked fast, like she couldn't believe what she heard. "Home," she repeated. "We never had that word before." In the back of the cabin, Lena was fast asleep, holding the bird book tight to her chest. A small smile rested on her face, like even her dreams had changed. Eli looked around his cabin, once silent, once lifeless, once cold, and saw life again, not just in the fire, but in the way the walls echoed with breath, with quiet laughter. With hope, he had saved them, but they were saving him too. Not with strength or weapons, but with warmth. The kind that comes from trust. The kind that heals what cages break. The silence after the attack was louder than gunfire. The two invaders were gone, one dead. One escaped, but their message stayed behind like a stain on the air. They were coming again, not to ask, to take. Theory stood outside the cabin, snow melting around her boots. Her eyes stared into the woods where the last attacker had vanished. Her hands were clenched, but not from fear, from decision, inside. Lena sat at the window, quietly drawing. Her hands moved slowly, tracing the shape of a bird flying across the sky. Her eyes were calm, but her shoulders were tight. She had seen the violence, but she didn't cry. Not anymore. Eli cleaned his rifle. For the third time that day, he didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He felt it too. The storm was not over. It was only resting that evening. As the fire crackled, Theory stepped forward, her voice clear. "Teach me everything." Eli looked up from his tools. "Everything." She nodded. "To shoot, to hunt, to fight. I don't want to run again. I want to protect her, protect us." Eli didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "All right," he said. "We start at sunrise." The next day, training began at first. Theory moved stiffly. Her body remembered pain, not power. Her grip on the weapon was too tight, her aim too wild. But Eli didn't yell. He never raised his voice. He just taught how to breathe, how to move with the earth, how to see before being seen. Lena watched from the cabin steps, wrapped in Eli's old coat. She cheered quietly when Theory hit the target for the first time, a proud little grin on her face. It gave Theory strength, more than the rifle ever could. But it wasn't only weapons Eli taught. He showed them how to build traps, how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to move through the forest without leaving signs, how to survive even if everything else was gone. One day, Eli handed Theory a simple wooden knife. Not sharp, but balanced. Use it to learn, he said, not to kill. But to understand your hands. Theory practiced with it every night, moving slow and quiet across the floor like a shadow. The old cage she was born in had made her body stiff, but now she moved like wind, like someone finally free. One morning, Lena brought them a picture. She had drawn 3 figures standing together on a hill, watching the stars, below it, in shaky letters. She had written, "We stay." Thury looked at Eli, heart beating fast. "She understands," she whispered. "She knows we won't leave this time." Eli nodded. "Then we make this place strong. Not just with walls, but with will." He gave Theory a radio jammer, salvaged and repaired. "This will block their signals when they return. It won't stop them, but it'll slow them down." They set traps around the perimeter, not to kill, but to warn. And they built an escape tunnel beneath the cabin floor, just in case. But something was different now. They weren't preparing to run anymore. They were preparing to stand. That night, as the wind howled through the trees again, Eli sat near the fire, polishing a dull, curved blade. Theory sat beside him, holding her training staff. Her eyes calm, focused, and Lena sat between them, drawing in silence. Sketching a bird with open wings flying, but not running, free, but not lost. Suddenly, a small sound echoed from outside metal against rock. They all froze. Eli stood, rifle ready. Theory reached for her staff. Lena held her drawing to her chest, like a shield. But then, nothing. Just wind. They waited, and then looked at each other. Eli lowered his weapon slowly. "Soon," he said, "they'll come again." Theory looked toward the window, her voice steady. "Then let them, because this time they wouldn't be taken. This time they wouldn't hide. This time they chose to fight together." Winter slowly faded into spring. The snow melted from the roof, and soft green shoots peeked from the frozen ground. The cabin, once a place of silence, now hummed with life, laughter, and purpose. Theory stood outside, holding a hand-carved wooden staff Eli had made for her. She watched Lena chase butterflies near the edge of the woods. The little girl's giggles echoed through the clearing like music. Just months ago, those sounds would have been impossible back then. Lena didn't laugh, didn't speak, didn't even look people in the eye. Now, she was smiling almost every day. Eli came out of the cabin with a basket of tools and smiled at the sight. "Looks like someone's finally faster than the wind," he said, nodding toward Lena. Theory gave him a side smile. "She's stronger than both of us," Eli chuckled. But then his expression grew serious. "They haven't come back, not since the attack. But that doesn't mean they're done." "I know," Theory replied. "That's why we keep training." She looked out toward the trees, not in fear, but with alert eyes. She had changed completely. Her body was stronger, her scars had healed, and her heart had opened, not just to Eli, but to herself. She no longer hated who she was. Lena ran back to them with a flower in her hand. "For you," she said, proudly giving it to Theory. Theory knelt, smiling. "Thank you, little star." Eli watched them both, warmth blooming in his chest. He had lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to belong. But now he didn't just have to guess, he had family. That night, they sat by the fire. The air outside was still cool, but the cabin felt alive. Thury held a book in her hands. Learning to read more English words, Eli sat beside her, fixing a small communicator they had salvaged from one of the attackers, and Lena was curled up with her bird book, whispering names to each one. Then, quietly, Lena spoke. Can we stay here forever? Theory looked at Eli, then back at Lena. What do you think? Lena thought hard, then nodded. It's warm. It's safe. It's home. Eli smiled gently. Home isn't a place. It's the people you trust. Theory stared at the fire. Those words hitting something deep inside. Her whole life home had meant cold walls, commands, cages, but now it meant soup cooking in a pot, music playing from an old speaker, and two hands reaching for hers when nightmares came. It meant knowing someone would fight for her. She took a deep breath and turned to Eli. We want to stay, if you'll have us. Eli didn't hesitate. You never needed to ask. This is your home now too. The next morning, Eli helped Theory plant seeds behind the cabin, vegetables, herbs, and wildflowers. He handed her a small sign he had carved from wood. It read, Sanctuary. What does it mean? Theory asked softly. It means a place where no one hurts you anymore. Eli replied, where you are safe, where you are free. She touched the sign and gently placed it in the ground, right next to the first seed. Weeks passed, and the garden grew. So did Lena's drawings, now full of birds, stars, and people holding hands, and every night. The fire in the cabin burned not because they feared the cold, but because they had found something worth protecting. They didn't know if the trackers would return one day, but they knew this: they would not run again. They would stand together, because home wasn't made of steel walls or star maps. It was made of warmth, of shared meals, of a human who looked at two broken alien girls and said, "Come home," and meant it.